The date was May 16th, 1947. The time was 8:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the curtain was set to rise at the Apollo Theater on 125th Street. Outside, the line wrapped around the block, a snake of fedoras and fur coats shivering in the spring chill, everyone desperate to hear the voice that could make a grown man cry into his whiskey. They were there for Lady Day. They were there for Billie Holiday. But inside the dressing room, the air was not filled with anticipation. It was thick with the chemical smell of terror. The room was a claustrophobic box of mirrors and lights. Billie Holiday sat at her vanity, her hands trembling so violently that the eyeliner in her fingers looked like a seismograph needle. She was sweating through her silk gown, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped bird. On the table, amidst the lipstick and the half-empty bottle of gin, sat a small, folded wax paper packet. It was the only thing that could stop the shaking. It was the only thing that could get her on that stage. And it was the very thing that was about to destroy her. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson stood by the door, his silhouette imposing against the peeling wallpaper. He wasn't there as a fan. He was there because he heard the whispers on the street that the Federal Bureau of Narcotics wasn't just watching. They were moving. Harry Anslinger, the head of the FBN, wanted a trophy. He didn't just want to arrest a junkie. He wanted to crucify a symbol. He wanted to silence the woman who dared to sing "Strange Fruit" in the face of white America. "They're here, William," Billie whispered, using the name only her closest friends knew. Her voice, usually a smoky cello, was cracked and brittle. "I saw them by the stage door. Men in raincoats. They're coming to take me." "Calm down, lady," Bumpy said, his voice a low, steadying bass. "Nobody is taking you anywhere but to that microphone. You don't understand." She grabbed the wax packet, clutching it in her fist as if it were a lifeline. "I can't flush it. I can't hide it. If I don't take it, I can't sing. If I take it, they catch me. They want me to fall, Bumpy. They want to see me break." Suddenly, the hallway erupted. Heavy boots thundered against the floorboards. There was no knock. The door to the dressing room splintered inward with a deafening crash. 3 men in cheap suits and fedoras burst in, their badges flashing, their eyes hungry with the anticipation of the kill. Leading them was Agent Miller, a man with a face like a clenched fist, who had spent months hunting the singer. "Federal agents!" Miller roared, his gun drawn, leveling it at the room. "Nobody move! Hands where I can see them!" Billie gasped, freezing in terror. Her right hand was clenched tight against her chest, holding the evidence that would send her to a federal prison for a decade. Miller saw the fist. He smiled, a cruel, thin stretching of lips. He knew exactly what was in there. "Drop it, Billie," Miller sneered, stepping forward. "Open your hand. It's over. The show is canceled." Bumpy Johnson moved. He didn't lunge at the agents. He didn't pull a weapon. He stepped purely on instinct, placing his body between the barrel of the gun and the trembling woman in the chair. It looked like a gesture of surrender, or perhaps a desperate attempt to shield a friend. He raised his hands, palms open, but as he turned his back to the agents to face Billie, his body blocked their line of sight for a fraction of a second. A heartbeat, no more. In that microsecond, Bumpy's hand brushed Billie's. It was a movement so fluid, so practiced, that it was less like a physical action and more like a transfer of energy. His large, calloused hand covered her small, trembling fist. He squeezed it once, hard. A silent command. "Trust me." "Get out of the way, Johnson!" Miller shouted, grabbing Bumpy by the shoulder and hurling him back against the wall. Bumpy hit the plaster hard, but didn't fight back. He stood there, smoothing his lapels, watching. Miller loomed over Billie. "I said open your hand." He didn't wait for her to comply. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it painfully. Billy cried out, tears streaming down her face, her resistance breaking. She opened her fingers. Miller looked down, ready to triumph. The flashbulbs of the press photographers, who had conveniently slipped in behind the police, popped. Blinding white light flooding the room to capture the moment of the star's disgrace. But as the glare faded, the room went silent. Resting in the palm of Billie Holiday's hand was not a packet of white powder. It was not heroin. It was a gardenia. A single, pristine, white gardenia, its petals slightly bruised from the squeeze, but undeniably beautiful. It was the flower she wore in her hair every night, the symbol of her elegance, her fragility, and her resilience. Miller stared at the flower. He blinked. He grabbed it, crushing the petals, looking for the drugs hidden inside. There was nothing, just the sweet, heavy scent of the flower wafting into the stale air. He looked at the floor. He looked at the vanity. He patted down her gown. Nothing. "Where is it?" Miller hissed, his face turning a shade of purple. "I know you have it. Where is the dope?" "I don't know what you're talking about, officer," Bumpy said from the wall. His voice was cool, detached, and laced with a mockery that cut deeper than a knife. "Miss Holiday is a lady. She was just preparing her costume." Bumpy stepped forward, pushing the stunned agent aside with the authority of a headmaster disciplining a child. He picked up the crushed gardenia from the table where Miller had dropped it and gently placed it back in Billy's hair. "You boys came here looking for a crime," Bumpy said, addressing the room, addressing the press, addressing the world. "But the only crime here is your interruption. This is a place of art. You're looking for ugliness where there is only beauty. Now, if you don't have a warrant for a flower, I suggest you get the hell out. The lady has a show to do." Miller looked at Bumpy, then at Billy, who was staring at the gardenia in the mirror with a look of bewildered salvation. The agent knew he had been played. He knew, with the certainty of a man who knows the streets, that a switch had happened. But he hadn't seen it. Nobody had seen it. And without the evidence, he was just a bully harassing a national treasure. "This isn't over, Johnson," Miller spat, holstering his gun. "We'll be watching." "Enjoy the show," Bumpy replied, holding the door open. The agents filed out, defeated, the photographers grumbling as they realized there would be no scandal tonight, only a story of harassment. When the door clicked shut, the silence returned. Billy looked up at Bumpy, her eyes wide, swimming with tears. She didn't ask how. She didn't ask why. She just reached out and took his hand, pressing it to her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. Bumpy didn't smile. He looked at her with a sadness that was older than the Apollo itself. "Go sing, lady. Sing for them. Sing for us." 10 minutes later, the curtain rose. The spotlight hit the stage, illuminating Billie Holiday in her white gown, the gardenia pinned to the side of her head, glowing like a moon. She stepped to the microphone, her hand steady now, fueled by the adrenaline of survival. The first notes of the piano drifted out, dark and mournful. Southern trees bear strange fruit. As her voice filled the theater, haunting and raw, tearing at the soul of every person in the dark, Bumpy Johnson stood in the wings, hidden in the shadows where he belonged. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling up into the rafters. He put his left hand into his trouser pocket. His fingers brushed against the cold wax paper of the packet he had palmed from her hand. He squeezed it. The heroin. The poison. The thing that was killing her. He was the man who sold it to the streets, and he was the man who had just saved her from it. The paradox weighed on him heavier than any gun he had ever carried. He was the protector of the artist, but he was also the architect of the prison she couldn't escape. He had saved her career tonight, but he knew, with a fatalistic certainty, that he couldn't save her from herself. He listened to the applause thundering for the woman with the flower in her hair. He took the packet out of his pocket and looked at it one last time. Then he crushed it in his hand, dropped it to the floor, and ground it under the heel of his expensive Italian shoe until it was nothing but dust. "You're welcome, Billy," he whispered to the darkness. Bumpy Johnson turned and walked away, leaving the gardenia of the Apollo to shine in the light, while he carried the darkness back out into the Harlem night.